Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Trust, Falling for You by Charish Reid, narrated by Morae Brehon. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Sun Tzu. Chapter 1. Day 1. Arrival.
God, no, Peter, Yolanda groaned. Please don't tell another theology joke.
The back of the charter bus joined in her exasperation, but it was too late. Once Peter Leonard got started on his biblical stand-up routine, it was difficult to stop him.
I see the English department doesn't have a sense of humor, he said. Have you ever heard why Jesus didn't become a lawyer?
Julia Crawford, her best friend from the history department, chimed in without even turning in her seat. He got hung up on the boards. Yolanda suppressed a giggle, knowing that Julia had suffered through most of these jokes because her office was right next to Peter's. After a well-rested summer, Yolanda could stomach Peter's corniness a little better than her friend. As she stared out of the bus window, she grew excited about the faculty retreat to the woods of Wisconsin. Their humanities dean promised that the mandatory team-building trip would be a great opportunity to strengthen work relationships and yada yada. Whatever. Yolanda hadn't fully listened to the year-end university meeting when Dean Craig introduced the idea to them. All she knew was that their private institution, Franklin U., had enough funds to send several departments to what amounted to a fun-filled adult summer camp. Julia did not share her sentiments. With her slender arms crossed over her chest, she leaned closer to Yolanda and whispered, You know I love you, but I also hate you right now. Yolanda could guess why. She glanced at Julia's downturned mouth and grinned. You're still jealous that I get my own cabin for the week? She goaded while nudging her friend. I can't help it if Rhonda got sick and pulled out. Julia sucked her teeth and made a face that didn't mar her pretty features. She was one of those people who still dressed up to go to the airport. A bus trip from Chicago to the middle of Wisconsin wouldn't catch her slipping. Her deep brown skin shone beautifully against her scarlet-red maxi dress. Her lipstick was an impossible match and still lovely, even as she scowled. I'm stuck with Brenda from communications, she whispered. You know the only communications she traffics in is gossip. She's going to talk my ear off for 6 days. I don't know why I couldn't just bunk with you. They can't put the two black professors together, Yolanda said. It would look suspect. Fuck that, Julia muttered.
How does Moses make his coffee?
Peter called out. The whole bus shouted back in unison,
He brews it.
That was their version of a bus sing-along. Yolanda was half listening to Julia snap at Peter when the rest of her attention was on the man walking towards the back of the bus, her work nemesis, Samuel Morris. While everyone was gearing up for a loose week in the woods, history professor Samuel was wound tighter than a Swiss watch. The man looked like he was desperately holding himself together as he walked down the aisle, holding a package of disinfectant wipes. Yolanda fought to not roll her eyes. The rule-following, orderly Dudley Do-Right couldn't stand to touch the common man's toilet stall on a bus, nor could he help himself from telling her to shush during all campus meetings. If anyone was going to be a stick in the mud during this trip, it would be him. Yolanda had deemed Morris a nemesis because he had a perpetual stick up his ass, and he won the Wilson Kramer grant that she applied for. That was a year ago. In the time she'd known him, they'd served on the same assessment committee, which was an autocratic nightmare with him at the helm. Hey, Sam, Julia said to her colleague as he tried to scoot down the narrow aisle. He stopped before her and Yolanda with a neutral expression on his handsome face. Yes, he was handsome. Yolanda couldn't deny that her nemesis was cute, with a strong jaw that constantly clenched, full lips that rarely smiled, and a striking dark brow that always furrowed. "You excited for the team-building festivities?" Samuel's forest green eyes flitted to Yolanda's before answering.
"Hi, Julia. Yolanda."
The terse smile he managed to eke out was pitiful. Yolanda gave him a two-finger salute and a nod.
"Honestly, I would rather have this time to work on my syllabi."
Classic Professor Morris. "Why don't you just use the same stuff as last semester?" Yolanda asked as lightly as she could. Even she knew it was too early in the trip to be spicy. Samuel blinked as his gaze returned to her. His long brown lashes lowered slightly as he quietly regarded her. He inhaled deeply, expanding his barreled chest before answering.
"The syllabus should always be checked and rechecked before each semester."
Yolanda rolled her eyes that time, but she cursed her bodily reaction when Samuel raked his fingers through his short brown hair. Even the small shock of gray at his temple added to his handsome features, and while everyone else dressed casually, he maintained his classroom look, complete with the white button-down shirt tucked into khaki pants. He rolled his sleeves to the elbow, revealing brawny forearms peppered with smooth dark hair. She'd seen his arms many times before this moment, but they still caught her off guard every time. Yolanda squeezed the bottom of her seat and maintained eye contact with him, as if his masculine presence had no effect on her.
"If you'll excuse me,"
he said after a beat. "Sure," Julia replied, settling back in her seat. After he had passed them for the back of the bus, Yolanda exhaled. "That guy," she muttered. Julia's gaze slid towards her as her sly grin grew. "Yeah?" "He just irritates me," Yolanda whispered. "While he checks and rechecks his shit, he makes the rest of us feel lazy." "I finished my syllabi," her friend said. "Haven't you?" No, she hadn't. Yolanda Watson worked on her own damn schedule. She would finish planning her English classes when she finished planning them, which was usually around the first week of classes. Sometimes students would get a complete syllabus a week in, and then they'd know what to expect from the rest of the semester. She'd had no complaints so far, and her student evaluations were stellar. As far as she was concerned, her teaching style made young people clamor for her classes. "I'll get them to them when we get back," she muttered. "Wait, do you seriously still hate Sam?" Julia asked. "I don't hate him." Her friend gave an impolite scoff. "You've had beef with this guy since he got that grant." "The Wilson Kramer grant," Yolanda corrected. "And yes, those laptops would have offered first-generation students an opportunity to catch up with the rest of the Franklin U population. Reliable technology can make a huge difference when some of these kids write papers for me." "I'm pretty sure that Samuel thought the same thing. Some of his students are your students, you know. You didn't lose out on that much." Except she had. A year ago, she'd worked hard on her first grant, struggling with the wording and format. She was certain her ability to teach composition would help her with the unfamiliar genre, but Samuel snatched it from under her nose. Not only that, but he was a prolific writer who consistently ended up in the faculty publications newsletter. His articles were always accepted into journals, and she had even heard he was working on his second Vietnam War monograph. Did she have time to write? No. Yolanda focused on a positive classroom environment. She was busy mentoring students of color who were new to the college experience. Guys like Samuel didn't have to worry about that while they wrote about Hanoi. Okay, maybe she was just jealous. "Maybe you don't hate him," Julia murmured as she studied Yolanda's face. "Mm-hmm. I know you," her friend said, wagging her finger. "You like a mystery. You want to know what makes a guy like him tick. That's why you're interested in him." Yolanda gave an indignant laugh. "Interested? Yes, or else he wouldn't be living in your brain rent-free," Julia said. "He's more interesting than the guys you find on Tinder, and you know it." The men she found on Tinder were entertaining. Sometimes she found one suitable enough to fuck, but most of the time Yolanda had fun trolling them. Before she could open her mouth to object, Peter interrupted with another joke.
"What made the priest giggle?"
A collective groan came from those within sitting distance. "Mass hysteria," Julia said, closing her eyes. "Give it up, Peter."
"Yolanda Watson, English Department,"
called out their dean, Craig Kowalski. He read from a clipboard while faculty gathered their baggage from the bus. "Here," she said, hitching her backpack on her shoulder. Craig was a tall and awkward man in his early 50s who always maintained a cheerful attitude about education. If any dean at Franklin University was going to start a team-building retreat, it would have been him. He adjusted his bucket hat over his bald head and glanced over his clipboard at her.
"Gotcha. You'll be in Fogg's cabin with Rhonda Phillips' Philosophy Department."
Yolanda nodded silently. There was no need to remind him that Rhonda was absent from the trip. She was this close to an empty cabin where she could go to bed whenever she wanted. The promise of walking around naked and snoring made her heart thrum with excitement.
"Mark Patterson, Theology Department."
Samuel Morris entered the tight circle of faculty members and spoke up.
"Mark said he wouldn't make the trip because of illness. I was supposed to share a cabin with him."
Dean Kowalski referred to his clipboard.
"Okay, no worries, Sam. It looks like you'll be by yourself in Rabbit Cabin." Actually,"
said a voice. Entering the group of Franklin University employees was a stout man in his 60s. His white beard hung to the center of his chest, covering the Redstone Retreat logo on his T-shirt. His skin was tanned and leathery, and his intense blue eyes scanned their group with curiosity. As they made room for him to enter the circle, he leaned on a tall walking stick and planted one fist on his hip.
"Rabbit Cabin is in a bit of a state," he drawled. "We got a busted pipe yesterday, and it's going to take a while to get that back on track." "Okay, then," Craig said, returning to his clipboard. "We're going to need to put Sam somewhere."
Yolanda kept her mouth shut. Surely there was no way her dean would push for a co-ed cabin. But if they really were short on space for the next 6 nights, there was nothing to be done. Maybe they could find Samuel a tent. "Yolanda's room is free," Julia announced. She shot her friend a deadly glare. Julia offered her a sweet smile. "Didn't you say that Rhonda had to pull out last minute? Whatever sickness is going around, Rhonda and Mark apparently got it." Yolanda's heart sped up as she stared daggers at Julia. She was almost afraid to look at Samuel, who stood only a few feet away with his one suitcase. She didn't want him to see the irritation on her face. The thought of staying in a cabin with her nemesis for longer than a night made her want to jump in the nearby Redstone Lake.
"Well, then, that's what we'll do,"
their dean said with a triumphant grin.
"Is that okay with you, Yolanda?"
Yolanda tore her eyes from her traitorous friend long enough to address her boss and the rest of the group, who waited to get to their own cabins. "Sure," she mumbled, "if that's okay with Sam." She glanced at her new roommate and was relieved that he had the decency to blush. Sam locked eyes with her and pursed his lips before shrugging.
"Sure."
Their boss clapped his hands as if that was final.
"Great. Everyone should go unpack, and we'll meet up in the main lodge in 20 minutes. How's that sound?"
As people wandered off to their respective cabins, Yolanda pulled her friend back. "I'm going to take one of those Dateline hikes and shove you off a cliff. Be sure to give Keith Morrison the photos from our trip to the Essence Festival. I looked really cute. Julia joked as she hitched the hem of her maxi dress from the dusty ground. I'm giving you a chance to get over your ridiculous grudge with Sam. 5 nights ought to do it, don't you think? You're the worst, she said, watching Samuel walk off toward Fox Cabin. And it's not even like that. Julia pulled her arm out of Yolanda's grip to adjust her large floppy sun hat over her curls. You call him your nemesis. Sounds like a grudge to me. Yolanda had a hard time denying that. Every time she entered the same space as Samuel Morris, she had said something to that effect. Besides, I think you have a crush on him, her friend said with a grin. Yolanda was aghast. What? Try that shit on someone else, Yolanda. You're talking to me, and I know when you're thirsty. Together, they watched Samuel carry his bag in the distance. Admit that you like looking at his khaki-covered ass as he walks away. His ass differs from the rest of him. The rest of him is pretty nice to look at. I haven't been looking, she lied. Samuel came to work every day in the same Clark Kent getup, slim-fit khaki pants and dress shirts. The outfit was routine, but the way he wore it was hard to ignore. For a man in his late 30s, he wasn't just holed up in his office writing. He had to be working out regularly. Julia scoffed and rolled her eyes. Well, he's been looking at you. Stop it. Girl, look at you. Even if the English department lets you dress like our students, you're still gorgeous. I've caught him checking your ass out, too. Yolanda's jaw dropped. Are you kidding me? The knowledge that Titus Morris checked her out was just as titillating as it was shocking. Most of the time, she showed up to class slightly late, wearing a hoodie and jeans. She told herself that she'd try to do better this fall semester. If she woke up early enough, she could work on something else besides her hair and makeup. Close your mouth, honey. You don't want to trap any of these country-ass flies. Just be ready for that hike, Jules, Yolanda muttered as she picked up her bags. Julia draped an arm over her shoulder as they walked in the general direction of the cabins. How long have we been friends? Yolanda laughed. Long enough for people to suspect foul play, I guess. Sam's not as bad as you think, Julia said, hugging her. I've worked with him long enough to know he's not very fun, but he's definitely not a meanie. If I can handle Brenda for the week, you can deal with him. Right before they broke off into different directions, Yolanda smiled. If I can't, I might try to make it work in Rabbit Cabin, busted pipes and all. Girl, bye, Julia said with a throaty chuckle. Yolanda watched her friend walk towards Bear Cabin, leaving her to her fate of traveling in the opposite direction. She tried not to treat her path like a walk to the scaffold, but Samuel Morris was already claiming a bed in the cabin where she had expected to relax in solitude. No walking around naked now. Chapter 2. Samuel tossed his bag on the queen-sized bed nearest to the bathroom and quietly appraised the space. 2 beds, 2 chests of drawers, 2 nightstands with 2 lamps. No television, but that didn't matter. He had downloaded a few episodes of House MD on his laptop, but had plans to format an article and finish up 2 syllabi this week. If he had trouble falling asleep, he'd let the wry-humored Dr. Gregory House lull him to deep slumber. Samuel had always felt a sense of ease when the sociopathic doctor solved tough medical cases after 40 minutes of hand-wringing. He'd need some sense of ease if he was going to share a cabin with Yolanda Watson for a week. He didn't dislike her. She just made him extremely anxious. She was a ball of loud chaos wrapped in a pretty package. When confronted by her presence, it was her beauty that made his speech measured and sometimes stilted. She had a habit of arriving late for their committee meetings, wearing jeans and T-shirts that accentuated her curvy body. The top of Yolanda's head came to his chin, but Samuel wouldn't dare call her small. Her big personality and loud laughter also set his nerves on edge. People immediately forgave her tardiness when her smile lit the room. Not only did their colleagues love her, but their students sang her praises. "Professor Watson brought us donuts for finals week." Samuel had never had the desire to reward his students with sweet treats, but he wished he could loosen up around them in the same way that came so naturally to educators like Yolanda. Samuel knew how to do two things: teach American history and write. Every semester, he worked hard to contribute a chapter to an edited volume, publish an article, or attend a conference. Anything to prove to the administration that he could pull his weight. As soon as Craig hired him, he sought tenure with tunnel vision. Job security after $100,000 in student loan debt was a powerful motivator, but ensuring that he'd never be as poor as he was as a kid ultimately drove him. Samuel had lived his life in a constant state of hypervigilance that made it difficult to form attachments to people. What if they pulled the rug out from under him and he was without a job, homeless, and had to return to Gary, Indiana, the place he worked so hard to escape? That's why he kept his head down, proved himself at his university, and stayed on the straight and narrow. But now his peaceful week would be threatened by a woman he was certain didn't like him. Every time she saw him, Samuel could tell Yolanda was trying not to roll her eyes at his insistence on order. While he stood in the middle of their small fox cabin, there was a knock at the door before it swung open. Yolanda stood at the threshold, wearing a pair of denim shorts rolled at the knee and a white T-shirt that read, "I fought the law." She'd tied her voluminous black curls up with a red bandana, as if she was ready for an outdoor adventure. "Hey," she said. Samuel took a deep breath before speaking. "I already chose a bed." Her frown told him he'd misspoken. "Okay." She rolled her bag inside, made note of his claimed space, and tossed her stuff on the other bed. "I drink a lot of water before I go to bed," he explained, as if it was necessary. "I go to the bathroom several times a night." This didn't earn him a response. He dug his hands in his pockets and walked to his side of the small room. "I suppose I should tell you now. I like to go to bed at 10 p.m., so if you don't mind turning off the light, that would be—" Yolanda paused while unzipping one of her bags. "Excuse me?" Another misstep. Samuel cleared his throat and tried again. "I'm just saying that I work better with a routine bedtime, and if you wouldn't mind indulging me, I'd really appreciate it." Her large dark eyes swept over him in such a critical fashion, he was tempted to shut the fuck up. The imperious arch of her black brow made him both fearful and aroused. The way she twisted her full mouth and planted a fist on her curved hip made him take another deep breath. Even irritated, Yolanda was still cute as hell. Was he allowed to think about his roommate like that? Stay professional, Sam. "I don't go to sleep earlier than 1 a.m., she said. "Right, let's get this out of the way, Sam," she said as she returned to her suitcase. "I had expected to have a cabin to myself, so I could let it all hang out in the Wisconsin woods. I have a backlog of terrible reality TV on my laptop I was going to watch until I fell asleep in the nude. But come to find out, there's a leaky pipe in the rabbit cabin, and I've now got a roommate. So Rhonda is sick for nothing." Samuel tried to digest everything she said, desperate not to get hung up on the part where she'd planned to be nude in the fox cabin. But what came out was nonsense. "Who's Rhonda?" he asked. She sighed. "Philosophy department. Don't you know anyone outside of history?" Honestly, he didn't. What I'm saying is, we're the oddballs who got stuck in a co-ed bunking situation, Yolanda continued. I don't even know how Craig thought this was a good idea. Samuel was also surprised how easily their boss paired them.
I assure you we can have boundaries, even in a space as small as this.
She paused from her messy unpacking and sighed. You're right, she said. It's just a week. We'll be fine. He gave her a resolute nod.
We will.
But he could already tell by the way she unpacked that Yolanda Watson was a messy person. There was no system to the way she organized her bag. She balled her shirts and shorts up under textbooks and folders. In the meshed zip compartment of her bag was a strip of gold-foiled packets. Condoms? Sam blushed and quickly averted his gaze to something on his side of the room.
What on earth did she expect to get up to this week?
Unless Yolanda was the kind of person who never unpacked her bags after a trip, a full unpacking was something Samuel did immediately after every conference. She threw her unmentionables into the top drawer of her dresser and let the rest of her clothes idle on her bed. She hurried past him into the bathroom, where she spread her hair and beauty products on every square inch of their shared counter. He buried the urge to tell her how she could organize the various tubs of moisturizer into a better system. Perhaps he'd work on it when she left the cabin. Once she exited the bathroom, she clasped her hands together and gave him a quick once-over. Are you ready to go to the main lodge?
You want to walk together?
He asked. Yolanda suddenly looked shy about the request, and he felt foolish for asking the question.
We don't have to. I just thought, No, of course we can walk together,
Samuel said, mentally cursing himself for sounding like a weirdo. He was only surprised because he got the sense that Yolanda didn't want to hang out with him any longer than necessary.
Yeah, let's get going.
He locked up behind them and followed her in the general direction of a larger building where their bus parked upon arrival. When Yolanda got to her group of friends, she immediately attached herself to them. His history colleague, Julia, wrapped an arm around her waist and pulled her close to whisper something in Yolanda's ear. Whatever it was, it made her hiss, "Shut up!" He couldn't help but think they were talking about him, but Samuel brushed it off. As soon as they entered the main lodge, their dean and his secretary, Joanne Stuber, were at the front of a large hall standing before the dinner buffet.
Everyone take a seat and we'll get started, Craig announced. Joanne and I are just going to talk about what's expected from you all this week.
Yolanda and her friends claimed a table near the back. She turned to him and asked, You want to sit with us, bunkmate? Samuel was surprised again.
Okay, yeah,
he said. He chose the chair next to her, so she sat between him and Julia. Peter from Theology and Chris from Communications were also at the table. In his 4 years at Franklin University, he hadn't talked to the two men outside of university events. He'd at least been introduced to Peter's terrible Jesus jokes, but Samuel hadn't engaged in small talk. The elderly man from the bus drop-off had also appeared at the front of the room.
I'm Gus Kelly, and I'm supposed to welcome you to Redstone Retreat. So, welcome. I'm going to give you all a rundown on the rules while you're here, so listen up.
He ran his hand down his white beard and gave the room a once-over before continuing.
Safety is real important to me, and your dean assured me that none of you are going to do anything stupid like walk off a mountain. Rule 1. For the sake of fire safety, we ask that you do all your smoking in our designated area, off to the side of the main lodge. The Redstone employees will supervise all campfires and bonfires. Pick up your litter, and don't leave foodstuff sitting outside of your cabins. You don't want the raccoons and bears pestering you.
Yolanda's eyes widened. There are bears?
It's Wisconsin,
Peter replied with a grin.
Of course there are bears.
She raised her hand as if she were in the classroom. "Excuse me, Gus?"
"Yes, ma'am."
"How often do you get bears on the grounds?" Old Gus chuckled.
"If we..."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?